Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Hare Krishna. Reading from Canto 3, Chapter 29, text number 28. The chapter is entitled Explanation of Devotional Service. Jiva Shreshta hi ajivanam Tatah prana bhrita shubhe Tatah sa chittaha pravaras Tataschendriya vrittayaha Jivaha shreshta hi ajivanam Tatah prana bhrita shubhe Tatah sa chitta pravaras Tataschendriya vrittayaha Jivaha shreshta hi ajivanam Tatah prana bhrita shubhe Tatah sa chitta pravaras Tataschendriya vrittayaha. Jiva shreshta hi jivanam Tatah prana bhrita shubhe Tatah sa chittaha pravaras Tataschendriya vrittayaha. Jiva shreshta hi ajivanam Tatah prana bhrita shubhe Tatah sa chittaha pravaras Tataschendriya vrittayaha. Vaishnavis. Jiva shreshta hi jivanam Tatah prana bhrita shubhe Tatah sa chitta pravaras Tataschendriya vrittayaha. Word meanings. Jiva, living entities. Shrestha, better. He, indeed. Ajivanam, than inanimate objects. Tataha, than them. Pranabhritaha, entities with life symptoms. Shubhe, O Blessed Mother. Tataha, than them. Sa chittaha, entities with developed consciousness. Pravaraha, better. Tataha, than them. Cha, and. Indriya vrittayaha, those with sense perception. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Please repeat. Living entities are superior to inanimate objects. O Blessed Mother, and among them, living entities who display life symptoms are better. Animals with developed consciousness are better than them. And better still are those who have developed sense perception. Purport. In the previous verse, it was explained that living entities should be honored by charitable gifts and friendly behavior. And in this verse and in the following verses, the description of different grades of living entities is given so that one can know when to behave friendly and when to give charity. For example, a tiger is a living entity, part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Supreme Lord is living in the heart of the tiger as Supersoul. But does this mean that we have to treat the tiger in a friendly manner? Certainly not. We have to treat him differently, giving him charity in the form of prasad. The many saintly persons in the jungles do not treat the tigers in a friendly way, but they supply prasad foodstuffs to them. The tigers come, take the food, and go away, just as a dog does. According to the Vedic system, a dog is not allowed to enter the house. Because of their uncleanliness, cats and dogs are not allowed within the apartment of a gentleman, but are so trained that they stand outside. The compassionate householder will supply prasad to the dogs and cats, who eat outside and then go away. We must treat the lower living entities compassionately, but this does not mean that we have to treat them in the same way we treat other human beings. The feeling of equality must be there, but the treatment should be discriminating. Just how discrimination should be maintained is given in the following 6 verses concerning the different grades of living conditions. The first division is made between dead stone-like matter and the living organism. A living organism is sometimes manifested even in stone. Experience shows that some hills and mountains grow. This is due to the presence of the soul within that stone. Above that, the next manifestation of the living condition is development of consciousness. And the next manifestation is the development of sense perception. In the Moksha Dharma section of Mahabharata, it is stated that trees have developed sense perception. They can see and smell. We know by experience that trees can see. Sometimes in its growth, a large tree changes its course of development to avoid some hindrances. This means that the tree can see. And according to Mahabharata, a tree can also smell. This indicates the development of sense perception. Translation once again. Living entities are superior to inanimate objects, O Blessed Mother, and among them, living entities who display life symptoms are better. Animals with developed consciousness are better than them, and better still are those who have developed sense perception. Om Jnanatimidandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruvaya Namaha. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. In fact, I was quite excited when I received this verse because there was a whole lot of biology in this verse. So I did a lot of research as a scientist here to try to find out what Srila Prabhupada has indicated. So many things about the trees, about the stones. So I did some scientific research to find out what kind of sense perceptions the lower organisms have when we talk about stones and trees and animals. So in this case, if we read the next 6 or 7 verses, it's very interesting how Lord Kapila has actually explained this in a very scientific manner. And he said the inanimate objects, such as stones, are lower than living entities that have life symptoms. And these in turn are lower than animals with developed consciousness, and those are lower than those who have sense perception. And when we talk about sense perception, we're talking about all the 5 gross senses: the eyes, the ears, the smell, the touch, and the taste here. And then Lord Kapila goes on and says the more higher than them are those which have many legs, and among those higher than those are those which are quadrupeds, 4 legs, and higher than those are those which have 2 legs. And those who have 2 legs, the best of those are the Brahmins. And the Brahmins who have understood the purport of the Vedas are better. But highest, more higher than those are those who have rendered or are rendering devotional service to the Lord. So that is sort of the hierarchy which is coming up in the next 6 verses here. So I've divided my talk into 5 brief sections here. The differences between humans and animals, and then when it's said that stones also have life, what does that mean? Stones cannot talk to us, but do they have life? We do know the super soul is present in each and every atom, including the stone. So we'll see how the stones are classified as sort of living here. And then according to science, what is classified as a living being? For us, we do know in our scriptures, a person or an entity is living simply by the presence of the soul, but how does this biology classify as something living here? And then very interestingly, I'll discuss briefly about the senses that animals have that we don't have. And we think that humans are on the highest scale. So we have to decipher when we say humans are the most sophisticated, the most developed. I would actually disagree, because when you look at the physiology of the human body compared to the animals, some of the animals, in fact a large number of animals, are much more sophisticated than us. So what separates us from the animals? Clearly we have very common elements of eating, sleeping, mating and defending. What makes us different from the animals is our higher consciousness, the ability to be able to understand who God is, basically be religious in our life. That is what sets us apart from the animals. And animals do not come to the temple or church, they don't pay obeisances, they cannot understand the scriptures, and that is why the humans are ranked at a much higher level here. And then Srila Prabhupada has mentioned interestingly how we should practice the power of discrimination. We don't go and hug tigers. The tigers is bound to attack us and eat us. We don't go and hug a snake. In fact, it is mentioned when you see a snake, the snake will only attack us if it feels being threatened. So if a snake is slithering by, we should not make any attempt to actually kill it. We should just move away and the snake will go in its own direction. But the moment we start chasing it with a stick, it will obviously defend itself. So that's one of the 4 elements of defense here. So very interestingly, I was reading in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela 10.1 purport, Srila Prabhupada has said, because a lot of devotees actually like dogs. I have a lot of friends too, even I actually like dogs. And dogs are therapeutically very important for the mental balance. This has been proven scientifically, and that is why hospitals have a lot of programs where dogs are taken into cancer wards, where people are given positive feelings just by looking at the dog or touching the dog. But Srila Prabhupada has written very specifically in this purport here, a dog naturally does not become a devotee at any time, but still it is sometimes found that a dog of a devotee gradually becomes a devotee also. We have actually seen that a dog has no respect even for the tulsi plant. Indeed, a dog is especially inclined to pass urine on the tulsi plant. This is written in the Chaitanya Charitamrita purport. Therefore, the dog is the number 1 non-devotee. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement is so strong that even a dog-like non-devotee can gradually become a devotee by the association of a devotee. Shivanand Sen, a great householder, devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, attracted a dog on the street while going to Jagannath Puri. The dog began to follow him and ultimately went to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and was liberated. Similarly, cats and dogs in the household of Srivas Thakur were also liberated. Cats and dogs and other animals are not expected to become devotees, but in the association of a pure devotee, they are also delivered. So this is a very important lesson for us, that in terms of preaching, we can actually preach to the animals also and the plants also. When we know when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was dancing in the forest of Jharkhand, he was actually making all kinds of animals chant and dance. So we have to have faith in that fact. The tigers were standing on their feet and dancing. So this is the power of the hearing of the animals and the ability to be absorbed in the holy name here. So what are things that are common between us and the animals, since there's a lot of talk about gradation of living entities, inanimate objects, and so forth. So all of us have the 5 gross senses. That's very common between us and the animals. And they also have a mind, they also have intelligence. They may or may not have a false ego, that is still debatable, but animals also fight amongst each other. But what do we lack that animals have that make them very sophisticated, much more sophisticated than us? There are certain senses that we don't have, and these are known as echolocation, where certain animals like bats and dolphins and whales, they can discern where the echo is coming from, and they can use it for their defensive system here. And we as humans do not have that echolocation. In the same way, we do not have the ability to sense either magnetic fields or electric fields. But animals such as aquatic animals and sharks and so many other animals can sense electrical fields and magnetic fields. In fact, it is mentioned here, this came as a big surprise to me, and I want to corroborate this, that there was a study done in, I believe, 2008 by German researchers who found that cows can sense the Earth's magnetic field. And they deliberately align their bodies in the north and south direction when they are grazing or they are sleeping or they are lying down. And this is very interesting. So there's a lot of work which is being done here, and I'm trying to investigate that the cows stand and sit in a direction which is in the same alignment as the Earth's magnetic field. The question is, why do they do this? So that is something that the researchers are probing. Not only cows, but other animals such as deer also do this. So there has to be a reason why cows are behaving in such manner. We don't do it. We cannot sense the magnetic field, although humans themselves have an internal magnetic field. And this is what people who follow Vastu Shastra, where they tell you how to sleep in the night with your head facing the east, where your kitchen should be, where your altar should be. There's a whole very intricate science about this to make things very auspicious in the house and your body also. So we have to align our magnetic field with the geomagnetic field. So we're not aware of this. Somebody has to tell us. People who are more advanced in the knowledge of so-called Rig Veda, where there is a lot of mention about how do we deal with plants and animals and nature. So this is really, really interesting here. And likewise, we do not have infrared vision. We can only see the visible colors, the 7 colors. We cannot see infrared, we cannot sense it. But there are animals like mosquitoes and snakes which can actually sense the infrared vision. So when we talk about being very sophisticated, yes, we are sophisticated in terms of our higher consciousness, ability to understand who God is, come to the temple, render our prayers, but in terms of other gross senses, we do not have that level of sophistication as the animals. And then Srila Prabhupada mentions here about how stones have life. And I was trying to do some research here. In fact, we do know that all of us, if there is no carbon on this planet, we would all die. If there's no carbon or nitrogen or hydrogen or oxygen, we would all die. We need oxygen to breathe, and breathing is going to give the energy to our red blood cells, which is going to supply the heart and so forth. But that's all gross. Without the presence of the soul, nothing is going to happen. So I was reading that there is a small bacteria. Most of the bacteria actually eat sugar, and they eat leaves and soil and so forth. But there is one very specific bacteria which eats stones. Very interestingly, it eats only stones, and it gives out sand. There's only one in the entire planet here, and this is found in Philippines, and this was discovered in 2019. So this is very interesting how a stone is being eaten. So that means this bacteria is getting life from eating the stone. And from a scriptural point of view, I was trying to understand how Mother Ahilya, the wife of Gautam Rishi, was cursed to turn into a stone by her own husband, because Lord Indra came and kind of behaved like her husband, and they had a union. And when Gautam Rishi came back and found out the adultery committed by Mother Ahilya, he actually cursed her to become a stone, and she was pleading with him to release her. And he said, no, I cannot release you from this stone curse, but Lord Ram will come, and when he puts his lotus feet on you, you will be released from this curse. So Mother Ahilya was turned into a stone. But she was not an inanimate stone. She was very much alive there, and she was waiting for Lord Ram to come. And then we know the story when Lord Ram came and he liberated her by placing his lotus feet. So this is an example. And I was trying to explore more about stones mentioned in our Vedas, and one thing that came to my mind was the most gorgeous and most powerful deity of Lord Narasimhadev in Mayapur. And I would strongly encourage you to read the book of how this deity came to be about. It's absolutely amazing and fascinating. The whole history, you can make a whole movie on this book, how the stone was acquired. And I was reading, in fact, Jananivas Prabhu had contributed to this book, how not any stone can be utilized to make a deity. And for this particular deity, Lord Narasimhadev, which is very black, it is mentioned by the sculptor that he needs a stone that has life in it. Then only he would be able to carve that deity. What does it mean by having a life in it? And that goes for every Vishnu deity, not just Lord Narasimhadev, but the reference here is with regard to the Mayapur deity. That it is mentioned that that stone can be used for making a deity, where if you hit the stone at 7 different places, it makes a sound, 7 different sounds, and those sounds are mentioned in the scriptures. This is in the book narasimhaleela.com. And so that is one test. The second test is, there is a small bug which eats that stone. And while that bug eats that stone, it makes a specific line in a circular fashion around that stone. So these are 2 tests which are confirmed, indicating that stone is ready to be converted into a Vishnu deity. And both these tests were satisfied when they acquired that big large stone for making, the black stone for making Lord Narasimha deity. So here we are talking about inanimate objects. For us in our daily life, children are throwing stones in the water, we are kicking stones, but do stones have life? So stones are made up of atoms. And atoms, each and every atom has a supersoul. So we should be very careful about things that Mother Earth has given us. The sand, the stone, the leaves, the flowers. We should be very, very respectful. In fact, it is mentioned here that when we get up in the morning, I do this every morning, that Mother Earth is our mother. So we should pay respect to her, and we should beg for forgiveness that I'm putting my feet on you and we're walking on you. So technically, we should touch the mother ground and, take her name and say, after taking a guru's name, that sorry, I'm stepping on you. So we have to respect nature, because nature is Krishna's energy. And if we don't respect Krishna's energy, we just do not have to respect Krishna's spiritual energy, we have to respect his material energy also. Because the material energy is giving us food. The trees are giving us fruits, the plants are giving us vegetables. So if we disrespect them, that's going to be very detrimental for us. And in fact, Bhrigupati Prabhu, His Grace Bhrigupati Prabhu, was telling us just a couple of days ago how, please correct me Prabhu, how 5 billion animals are killed every single day. And we were having a discussion and we were talking about this, that Mother Earth is watching all this and she is not going to lie silent. She is going to respond. She is being exploited. The animals are her children. So the moment she sees exploitation, she is going to respond. And we know how the response is going on. We do know there's famines, there is droughts, there is floods, and the whole climate has changed a 180-degree turn. And somebody was asking me, how come it's so cold in California in March? And I was just telling, this is a change in the climate. This is now bitterly cold winds in the night. This is something that we have to expect. Everything is going to be topsy-turvy in this age of Kali Yuga. And in fact, while I was driving this morning, it took me much longer. Normally it takes about 35-40 minutes. Today it took me 55 minutes because there was an accident on the way. And there was a brutal car crash and there was a motorcycle, on the road, and there were tons of ambulances. And I was thinking, we lose attention for just 1 second and we land into an accident. And it can be very risky for us as well as others on the freeway. So what happens when we lose our attention in our spiritual life? Maya grabs us right away. She's right behind us. She's just right behind us. The moment we let go of our guard, she's going to grab us. Because that's a service given to her by the Lord that keep individuals trapped in the material world. But if we take one step towards Krishna and cry to him, please engage me in your service, Krishna sees that we are trying to get out of this material world, and he will give us all resources to be able to counteract the impact of Maya. But Maya is actually very, very strong here. And I was actually reading a billboard also, which is very sad how the modern society is putting all these billboards on the freeways, and these billboards are extremely distracting and probably one of the reasons for causing accidents. And one of the billboards, which was just recently before we exit on Culver Boulevard, is like a huge billboard which is written, I don't want to use these words, but I want to share this, how people can get attracted and result in thousands of accidents. It's written, there's a very voluptuous woman there, and the title of the movie is Dying for Sex. And I was thinking, this is so inappropriate on the freeway, because people are invariably going to see it and their senses are going to be attracted, and lo and behold, there's going to be accidents. And this is what is happening. So the government is in such a pathetic position. There is lack of regulation to at least curb elements that can distort our senses from public grounds where there is a high incidence of causing accidents. They should be able to do it, but they don't do it because it is all commercialized, there is revenue generation and so forth. So unfortunately, this is what is going on here. So that was just a little digression here. So in terms of biology, from a scientific point of view, what is classified as living versus non-living? So living beings are classified as living if they show 4 different characteristics. 1, the body should be composed of cells, which we all have. In fact, humans have 3.2 trillion cells. 2, they should be able to reproduce. They should be able to give rise to their own kind. 3, they should be able to use energy, and we do use energy from our food, from our water. And 4th, they should be able to respond to the environment, and we do. When we touch something hot, we have a reflex action and we turn away. So living entities which show all these 4 symptoms, according to biological references, have life here. So one thing which is extremely interesting is, I'm sure most of you have encountered this. We were afflicted by the COVID-19 pandemic, which is caused by viruses. And if you don't know, viruses are very unique creatures. I don't even know if we want to call them creatures, because viruses are dead outside a body. But once they go inside a body, whether it's an animal body or a human body, they are alive. So I would love to have a discussion with His Grace Dhrutakarma Prabhu, who is sitting here, to see how do we classify this from a Vedic perspective. From the biology perspective, they are obligate living entities. That means they're living inside the body, but they're not living outside the body. So very, very interesting. And biologically, there's no research which is done to classify them into a separate kingdom. They're living or non-living. There's no classification because they fall in their own separate category. So here we do know that viruses can wreak havoc into the body. And we do know one simple virus, such as coronavirus, which is simply made up of a nucleic acid and some proteins, like 14, 15 proteins. We have 30,000 proteins in our body. But a virus, that virus has only 12 or 13, I'm not sure the exact number, less than 30 proteins. All it had to do was go inside the body and completely destroy our immune system and destroy our lungs. Even the virus that causes AIDS, the HIV virus, all it does is goes and attacks our immune system and completely destroys the T cells. The T cells are the ones which give us a lot of immunity. And when the T cell count goes down, infections build up in our body and a person dies. So how do we say we are so sophisticated when a simple virus, and all it takes is one virus, by the way, because it can go inside the body and start replicating and multiplying, that can destroy our entire immune system. So we have to take a step back and really realize that our ego should not be so inflated. There are so many living creatures which can completely destroy us in a matter of 2 days. A virus can shut down our immune system, and when immunity is lost, all our organs can fail, and that is known as multi-organ failure, where people die off. So this is extremely important to understand when this classification is made, how certain animals are much more sophisticated than us. In fact, it is mentioned here that trees can see and they can smell here. And when I was thinking of eyes, I was doing some research on the visual performance of certain animals, and I came across this wonderful collection of animals which have such large eyes that, for instance, dragonflies have eyes which cover their entire head. So our eyes cover maybe about 15% of our face, but for dragonflies, the entire head is eyes only. And the squid, which is in the ocean, the eye of a squid is the size of a football. That's amazing. And then some primates have eyes which don't move. They're completely fixed. So we can move our eyes. We can move our eyes, look here, without moving our head. But certain animals have to turn the entire head to be able to see. So this is just visual. And very interestingly, reindeers have eyes which change colors according to the seasons. Extremely interesting. We don't change our color eyes. They are either brown or blue or gray and so forth. And there is a fish which has 4 eyes. 2 eyes on the top, 2 eyes at the bottom. So this fish is very interesting. 2 eyes are required for seeing anything above the water, and 2 eyes required to see something under the water. So I can go on and on and on. And chameleons have the ability to change their colors. Can we change our colors? We cannot. And so when we compare ourselves, what kind of defense do we have? We can punch somebody in the face, but we can't kill them. We can strangle them, but that person will fight back. So for us to be able to attack somebody, we need swords or knives or bombs or whatever. But animals are so sophisticated. How does a snake kill? Through poison. How do certain stingrays kill? Through poison. How do certain animals capture their prey? Through their sticky tongues. We don't have sticky tongues, thankfully. We don't have poison. So who is more sophisticated in terms of defense? They can attack somebody who is much larger than them. A snake can kill an elephant simply by biting it. But for us, we need these very big tools to be able to decimate people who are much larger than us, or even animals much larger than us. So here we talk about sophistication, but we should take a step back and see we physiologically are not the most sophisticated. And I speak as a biologist here. In fact, our hearing is not as sophisticated as those of dogs or dolphins. It is mentioned the humans have a maximum capacity to hear up till 20,000 hertz. But there are certain dolphins, certain classes of whales, dolphins, and dogs and cats, which can hear 300,000 hertz, which means about 15 times more than humans. In fact, they can even hear ultrasonic waves, which we cannot. So there's a whole lot here. And then very interestingly, I'm going to end here in terms of trees having the ability to see and smell. Very interestingly, it is mentioned trees do have eyes. And they have the sense of smelling, but not in the same way like we have eyes. They have their own rudimentary eyes. Otherwise, why would a tree grow towards the sun? Because it's bending towards the sun. It is trying to get the sunlight from the sun. It is mentioned that trees also do competition. If someone has gone to Muir Woods close to San Francisco, gorgeous woods, you can see these giant redwood trees, or I'm sure there are other trees, growing very, very tall. It is mentioned that the roots of these trees are 3 times the height of the tree. So if the tree is 100 meters tall, the roots are 300 meters spread out. And trees also practice competition. They try to grow longer than their neighbors because they want to harvest all the sunlight. So this is going on here. Even trees can see and smell. And very interestingly, we tell ourselves that non-violence is so important. We should not kill animals, meat, no eggs, no meats, and so forth. But you'll be surprised to know that there are plants which are non-vegetarian. There are certain plants which eat animals. It's the other way around. And these plants are known as carnivorous plants. Some of the examples are the Venus flytrap and the pitcher plant. And yesterday night, while preparing for the class, I was watching a video. It's pretty graphic and it makes you actually wince and cry, where this plant is like having two receptacles, like leaf-like structures, and the moment a mosquito or a little bug falls, it immediately closes. Immediately. And then the plant secretes juices and the bug is destroyed in 2 hours. So these are known as carnivorous plants. So for us, we do know there's 8,400,000 species, and 400,000 are the human beings. What about the remaining 8 million? There are so many living entities which are not yet discovered. And the majority of them, according to science, are lying in the ocean. In the ocean, we have only discovered about 3.5% of the living entities. The remaining 96.5 are yet to be discovered. So unfortunately, we cannot go down at the depth of the ocean because the pressure will kill us. The pressure is too high, and sometimes the temperature is freezing cold, so we cannot go there. We need submarines and so forth. But Krishna has made these amazing creatures, small single-cell creatures, which can tolerate the pressure and the cold, and they can survive there. And living entities also survive in the fire. We've talked about those. So I just want to summarize here that Lord Kapila is saying, he's giving a very beautiful gradation of inanimate and then higher than them with those developed consciousness and those with sense perception and so forth. We should be very humble in understanding that all these living entities around us have to be respected. Because if we don't respect them, they won't respect us. That is, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That kind of, the third axiom in physics is the reaction may not come immediately, but it will come. It's just a question of time. And for us, that is known as the karmic reaction here. So, there is a lot of mention in Rig Veda, in Padma Puran and Matsya Puran, and Agni Puran, how there's dialogues between different rishis like Rishi Bhardwaj and Rishi Bhrigu, where they've talked specifically about how trees can sense pain and sorrow, and how as human beings we should not cut plants in the night after sunset. Why? Because the plants are sleeping. So there's a whole lot of mention. I dug out so many resources here, which trees should be respected particularly, like the banyan, peepal, Indian gooseberry, ashoka, all of these have to be respected. So our Vedas, and most importantly the Rig Veda, actually gives a lot of references about how humans should be treating animals and plants, and we can spend months and years reading that. But for us, it suffices to say that when we read the Bhagavatam, it gives the complete etiquette on how we should deal with each other as well as the plants and the animals here. So for us, one important principle of Vaishnava etiquette is compassion. And I was just reading this, Civilization and Transcendence, and I'm just going to end my class by reading where Srila Prabhupada said, where Pushta Krishna Prabhu had asked Srila Prabhupada, what is religion and what separates us from the animals? And Srila Prabhupada responded, in Kali Yuga, this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, there shall be waning of these qualities: religiosity, truthfulness, cleanliness, tolerance, memory, bodily strength, duration of life, and mercy. These are the human assets which make us distinct from animals. So I would like to end the class here. And if there's any questions or corrections or feedback, please.
Thank you for an amazing, wonderful class. Little, technical, small questions. One is you mentioned about the snakes. How if if they don't feel threatened, they'll just kind of continue on their path. But there is that verse I believe it's in the 7th canto, Modeta Vrishchika Sarpahacha, where it says that the snakes and the scorpions should be killed, and there's no sinful reaction because they're very envious. And so, how would you?
I've read multiple elements, and please, Archita Prabhu, you can correct me. These animals are characterized by a sense of envy, So these are envious creatures, not that we don't have envy. But I also read that if they are not attacking you and they don't have an intention of attacking you, then you should let them be in their own realm and let them live the way they are. But to the point that they attack you, I think there was a pastime with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also, where the stick, I'm not remembering the pastime at this point, about a snake, that they should be killed because they are envious creatures, and please correct me. But my understanding is, if somebody is not attacking you and they want to live their lives, let them be. Please correct me. Especially with regard to the Canto 7 that Prabhu was saying.
Yeah, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta ordered that cobra to be killed because it was right next to Srila Prabhupada. We don't organize hunts like in some so-called religions. They go out and hunt rattlesnakes and they round up thousands of them. So in Vaishnavism, we don't go out and hunt animals, even the vicious ones. But in that particular case, he was on the balcony and he could see from his vantage point that there was a cobra right near to Srila Prabhupada. So he ordered one of the brahmacharis to kill it. And Srila Prabhupada said even he himself was doubtful. Here's a sadhu, a saintly person, he's ordering this snake to be killed. And then when he saw that verse in the 7th canto about even saintly persons are delighted when, envious creatures are killed. But that means that the envious creature is threatening you, not that you go out and look for them and kill them.
Thank you for the correction. Yes.
Like a silly question, but what kind of food could a sage in the forest present to a tiger that would be of interest to it?
That's very interesting. What kind of food? Tigers are carnivores. They survive on meat. You put me on a spot here, Prabhu. The sage is not going to get animals just to feed the tiger. A sage is non-violent by nature. And I would really defer to Archita Prabhu again, because I don't want to give a wrong response here.
Because we know before the British went to India, there were so many tigers, practically a tiger every square meter. But some or other people lived in harmony with them. So Prabhupada mentioned that many gurus would have their ashrams in the forest. And they would just put out cow's milk in the evening and say, "Tiger, please come and take milk and don't disturb my students." Prabhupada mentioned that in one class.
So I guess they can hunt on their own. They have the skills. But I guess the point is, we don't go hugging animals which are likely to destroy us. We give them prasad, and the prasad can be milk if somebody is living in the forest. But we don't go specially looking for a tiger to give prasad, because the tiger is going to kill us anyway. And most of us don't live in the forest. But some sages do live in the Himalayas, and I'm not sure how they interact with the animals there. I've never lived in a forest.
I don't know if I read this in his book, The Journey Home, or if I heard it in a lecture, but Radhanath Maharaj was saying that when he was living in the Himalayas there in the forest, the sadhus taught him just respect their space. And even these dangerous animals, if you kind of respect their space, they don't come after you. So I don't know. I was, it's different than the impression that I had of these animals, because they're, what's the word? Ferocious. But anyway, that's what he said. So.
Yeah, Maharaj did that, yeah. I remember, yes. He gave them the space. And I think it has to do with the power of discrimination. Using our intelligence at the right place, at the right time, towards the right person. So, in fact, there are human beings which are much more envious than animals. Much more envious. So we don't kill them, but we can pain them or hurt them. For us, our defense is our tongue. So by speaking the wrong words or painful words, we can actually cause a lot of pain to people. So unlike poison and venomous tongues and sticky glues, we don't have those things, but we can still cause pain and harm to individuals simply through our words. And that is why Srila Rupa Goswami says, curbing of the tongue is so extremely important. not just from a point of view of controlling our diet, but also controlling our speech, vacho vegam, which is extremely important. So yes, personally, I think, and I could be wrong, I like to give space to each and every living entity, not, if a tiger comes in front of me, basically follow the instinct. Lie quiet, don't make a sound, and let the tiger go on its own way. And I'm sure there's multiple opinions here, but I hope that answers.
Have you ever heard anything like about this? Like sometimes, just before a big natural disaster, like an earthquake, or
Yes.
the animals know ahead of
Yes.
time and they split. I've heard that.
It's true, Prabhu. It's true. In fact, there is strong scientific evidence, and there's a lot of papers written on it. Before the tsunami, I don't remember which year, the tsunami hit Japan. The small animals, the deer, and I think the squirrels and the birds, they just about 11 to 12 minutes before the tsunami hit, they changed their entire course and they moved away from the ocean completely. So they could sense, and they have the sense of echolocation and sonolocation. So these vibrations which were building up from the depth of the ocean, which the humans could not listen, they could be sensed by the animals, and the animals changed course and they moved towards the mountains where the earthquake and the waves could not be felt as much. So there is strong evidence for that biologically, that animals can sense it.
Do you ever hear anything like this? There was this, I don't know if it's true for all dogs, but there was definitely this, I remember the name Shelby. There was this, they did scientific experiments with this dog, and you could always sense when the owner was going to come ahead of time. They changed the times, they changed it just had like some sort of psychic connection with its owner, and 15, 20 minutes before the owner would come, and once again, as I said, it wasn't the same time every day, that dog would go from wherever it was, go up into a spot right in front of the door or something, or the window, waiting for its owner, so that it could. Have you ever heard anything?
I have not read too much about animal studies because I do mostly, other stuff. But there is ample evidence that dogs can be trained. So there's two ways. They can be trained and they have naturally acquired skills. And it also varies based on the breed of the dog. Some dogs are extremely smart, like German Shepherds and Labradors. That's why they make the best friends for humans. And therapeutically, they are the best. And whereas other dogs are known for their extremely ferocious traits and they cannot be trained, like bulldogs or pit bulls and so forth. So even when we talk about animal kingdom, when we talk about a dog or a cat, there are so many species and they have different criteria. So just to clump them that all dogs are the same and they can sense their owners coming back, I would say that there is a level of discrimination there also. Some dogs don't have that level of intelligence, like maybe the canine dogs that the police uses, mostly German Shepherds, or the customs they use for sniffing out certain drugs in the airport. They use only specific breeds of dogs. They don't use any dog walking, So I would say from an animal point of view, there is gradation also. For instance, in human society, in Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, in the same way, animals also have gradations. But we don't have, at least I don't have, exact knowledge of that because it's not my field. Ramedana Prabhu. Sorry, we'll come to you also.
You mentioned how there's so many different species of dogs, but is that actually a species or it's just a variety of the same species?
So both, Prabhu. There's both. So there's different species also, and I don't have the number, but there's the whole lot of species based on their morphology. I'm sorry about the scientific words, but based on their form, they're based on the hair, and based on their structure of the ears, they are defined into different species, and within the species, different forms. So both apply.
Yeah, I'm just mentioning that because a couple years ago, Druta Karma Prabhu was telling me that maybe he knows now, but he wasn't sure what Prabhu was referring to as like species. Is that, like there's so many different dogs or plants that go beyond, the numbers. So he wasn't sure about that. I just was wondering.
Even I'm not sure, Prabhu, because for that we'll have to go into what we call taxonomical classification of animals in the earth, on the planet Earth, and I'm not an expert on that in terms of classification. So we used to read this when we were children in school, but after that we kind of gravitate away.
Okay. Thank you.
You had a question, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry? The TV, I think, maybe you can ask me a question separately because we're a little bit over time here, if that's okay with you. I don't think the TV is on. Okay, can I see this later after the class? Because it's an animation, it may take a long time. Maybe you and I can have a talk. After the class. Yeah, sure. Thank you. If there's no more questions, I would like to thank you for your attention and please forgive me for the long class. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.